forward, weeks before we can actually vote, we're going to get access to the voter rolls all around our church. We're going to host, hopefully we can be back in person and host everybody, bring your cell phone, and we're going to have pizza and or whatever, have a meal, and get on the telephone and call people and encourage them to vote and do get out the vote drives. And all of these things are extremely critical. And it ties directly into this redistricting discussion. One thing that I think oftentimes is lost is that we think civic engagement starts and ends with casting our vote. And the entire democratic experiment is that that's just one very small, that's the bare minimum. But it is advocacy, engagement. It is exercising the right as a constituent. It is organizing people. All of those pieces are critical. And so all of the various things that are being talked about tonight, the redistricting map in this room, criminal justice issues, education issues in the various other rooms, it is just critical that all these things are undergirded by the power of the vote and the power of people. And so I just wanted to stress souls to the polls, early voting, early voting, early voting. Matt can talk about a whole host of things that the Institute is working on in regards to, I know there's a big push for same-day voter registration. All of these pieces from a civic engagement standpoint are critical. And as we know that voting rights are under assault for folks all throughout the United States is that much more critical. So that's my time. I thank you. I'm dipping into the other rooms, but you are in good hands with these folks here to talk you through redistricting, why it's important and so critical. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Boyer. I just realized I never introduced myself. I introduced Matt, Reverend Boyer, and didn't tell you who was talking. My name is Tiara Parker. I am the pastor of Broad Street United Methodist Church in Burlington, New Jersey. I've been a pastor for 3 years now, so I'm low-key new in the community. So I'm really learning and working towards bringing souls to God. One of my passions is social justice. It's just something that I've been born to do. Even when I was little, I used to get in trouble. I'd fight kids who would get beat up by the bullies and stuff. And my mom is like, why can't you just like tell the principal? And I'm like, no, they need a swift hand of justice. And she's like, this is why you're always on punishment. Like, I don't understand. So I've just been doing that since I can remember. But now I have the opportunity and the grace to be able to put my love for justice into good work. So now I am working with Reverend Boyer with the Salvation and Social Justice as a fellow, specifically on redistricting and educating us on what that is, how it impacts us, and what can we do to get our representatives to listen to us. So that's why it's so important to recognize that redistricting impacts us. And to talk a little bit more about what redistricting is, Matt will give us some time to talk about that. Matt?
Thanks. And Reverend Parker actually made an incredible video, which goes over some of the things that I'm going to go through on I have a PowerPoint setup, which I've never been able to get to work over Zoom. It's always like really weird and choppy and never seems to function. So we're not going to do it, but I'll send it to everyone afterwards. It's like really well done. It's way better than hearing me speak about things. So I encourage you to check that out. If after the session you're like, I need a refresher that's better than what Matt did. Let's start. Pause at any time, put something in the chat or just talk. There's not a ton of us here, and I would love to have this be a conversation between all of us. We're going to go over quickly just like what redistricting is, because I think for a lot of people it's something that they're not super well aware of. We only do it once every 10 years, so a refresher is really helpful. And then I know Reverend Parker is going to talk about why that's important to you all as pastors, to the faith community, and then we're going to return to what you can do. This is actually a pretty time-sensitive call to action here. We could use your help within like the next month. So we will definitely be asking you for your help very soon. So let's start. So redistricting. It is a wonky word that pretty much just means we are redrawing our district lines. So the way we think about our democracy is that all of us get together and we each have a representative. And in order to make it fair, it is that the same amount of people elect one representative. So if you have 100 people, every 10 people gets one representative. And that actually wasn't true for most of American history. It's only been true for the last 50 years. But the goal, again, is to make it so you can't, if one person has one representative and 10 people have one representative, that one person has a ton more power, right? Because they are the only person that representative needs to listen to in order to get elected again. So we, every 10 years, when the census comes out, we redraw our district lines. We redraw these lines to determine who is the group of people who is going to elect one representative, which is great in terms of making sure, it's one person, one vote. It's challenging because you can draw lines in 1,000 different ways. I know Reverend Parker has been part of the mapping conversations we've been doing with a Fair Districts Coalition. You can draw these lines in 1,000 different ways and you can create 1,000 different outcomes. So the goal is to draw the lines in a way that's fair, in a way that actually represents where people live, where their communities live, particularly in New Jersey.
On the doc that we're looking at, not just.
Any questions? Just shout them out. I'm right here. So here's with the redistricting process, only comes once every 10 years, and then effectively it's a sprint. So we are actually already halfway done with the redistricting process. In New Jersey, there are 2 separate commissions that draw 2 different groups of lines. There's the congressional district map. So those are the 12 representatives we send to the House of Representatives to go work with Nancy Pelosi, right? That's like Congressman Payne, Congressman Sherrill, Congressman Malowski. Those are our congressional representatives. There are 12 of them. Then we have 40 legislative districts, right? So those are the assembly people, the state assembly people, the state senators who go to Trenton and work with former, I used to say State Senate President Steve Sweeney and Senate Majority Leader Conklin, but I know that's changed now. But they go to Trenton and they work there. So the congressional map is done. They finished the congressional map right before Christmas. I'd be happy to talk about it. But the legislative map, which is actually the more difficult map, it's the more contentious map. It's the map that the people in power actually care a lot more about because they're redrawing the districts that they are getting elected from. That is still in process. That is still ramping up, and there is a ton of opportunity to get involved, but it's just for the next month. I will keep saying over and over again. And why do we need to do this? Because we don't have good maps. So I think many people have probably heard about Texas. I know there's been lots of, if you are joining this discussion group, I assume you probably have some understanding of redistricting going wrong in certain places. So Texas, for example, 40% of people in Texas are non-Hispanic white people. And the state of Texas drew districts so that non-Hispanic white people are a majority in 60% of the seats, right? So even though they're a minority in the state, they are going to control a majority of the seats. And that's terrible. It's considered to be a horrible gerrymander. The Department of Justice is suing them. In New Jersey, 10 years ago, when we redrew our districts, New Jersey was 40% people of color, but we drew seats so that people of color only had a majority in 25% of the seats. So in Texas, again, there's a 20% gap, horrible racial gerrymander. It was a 20% gap between the proportion of people in the state and the amount of seats they were expected to get. In New Jersey, we had a 15% gap. It's not that far away. So we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. We particularly need to make sure that doesn't happen again because there's been a huge growth in people of color across the state, right? It's 48% of New Jersey residents are now people of color. Just a huge increase. A lot of that has come from urban areas in the north. And these are places that don't have the same representation of more rural areas down south. So we need to shift it and we need to redraw these lines in ways that are fair, in ways that are racially equitable, in ways that translate into power. So I think sometimes the difficulty people have is the connection between the drawing of the lines and power, because that's what this is all about. Redistricting is about power. You can get people to turn out, you can get people to register to vote, but if the lines are drawn so that things are unfair, you're fighting an uphill battle. But the goal here really is to make sure it's a level playing field so that all of your great work turning people out, all of your great work registering people, all of your great work getting people engaged is able to operate in a fair system and their voices are able to be heard. And if redistricting goes wrong, those voices can be silenced no matter how much work they put in. That's why this is so important. We don't want to give the politicians, because in New Jersey, politicians redraw the lines. We do not want to give the politicians a free rein to make decisions behind closed doors, right? They have in the past cut up neighborhoods in order to suit their own political ends. And you may feel an affinity towards one or another political group. We're C3, so we're staying out of it. But we want to make sure that they have to listen to us, because we've drawn district lines that have equated people and communities to power. So I'm just going to go over this one more time, try to make that connection. I'm going to keep repeating that line over and over and over again. Redistricting is about power, because it really is. This is the fundamental exercise of power. So what does it look like if it works? Well, what's our goal here? Our goal is to make sure that people and communities and their issues are able to be translated into representation, and then eventually money and system change and whatever other sort of reparative systems we want to fix. And it's a path, right? So let's say you keep a community together. You give the community is able to be a majority in a certain district. You're able to speak and elect a representative. But that representative doesn't just want to listen to them, they have to listen to them. Because if they are a majority of the people in their district and they don't listen to them, they're not going to win an election. Right? They know that their seat is dependent upon them being of service to this community. And let's say this community has a need, right? The community is in a food desert. And this is something we've actually heard from members who have spoken before the commissions across the state, issues like this. I think someone from East Orange actually spoke exactly to the issue of a food desert, the previous portion committee meeting. So there is an issue. Those people share that issue with their representative. The representative says, I need to solve this issue or I'm going to lose my seat. So they introduce a bill. They introduce a bill that is going to fix that issue. It's going to get better, healthy food options into the community. So you have a direct connection between the lines we've drawn, the power that's been turned into a representative, the representative that's been turned into systems change, into different flowing, into the way resources flow differently. It's a line of district to power. If we don't do this, so there are different ways we couldn't do this. This is an example of something that's called cracking. If we don't do this, let's say we take the same community, same issue, they still live in a food desert, but you draw the district differently. You place the community into 3 different districts, so they're not a majority anywhere. They're a minority in every single district they're in. The community still exists. The problem is still there, right? There's still a food desert, but the elected representatives in those 3 districts have less of a reason to listen to that community than they would before. They're only a small portion of the people that they represent. And so their issue isn't really as important to them. And so even though there's a large number of people who share this issue, because they've been cracked, because they're now split across these different districts, they don't have that same access to a representative. They don't have the same access to power. It's harder for them to get resources they need. And this is what has particularly been done with communities of color across New Jersey. So we need to fix it. That's I'm running a little quickly because I know we don't have a lot of time, but that's redistricting 101. Any questions?
I do have that video, Matt, on my computer, so it'll actually play if you'd like for me to play it.
We could try it. I haven't put it to work on Zoom, so maybe we could send it out to the group afterwards.
Okay.
Yes, your question?
Has the Institute drawn some districts that reflect what you are suggesting that we advocate for?
So Reverend Parker and I are in the process of drawing a racial equity map for New Jersey's legislative districts. Yes. We're not quite there yet, and we're doing it with a lot of other different partners across the state, so it is a process. We do have a draft map that hasn't been signed off by the whole coalition yet. We are hoping to have that ready by the end of the month. So we're not quite there yet, but we're working on it. We were able to draw one for the Congressional Commission. We drew 12 congressional districts we felt was a racial equitable map, and we are doing that for the legislative map, but we're not done yet.
Is that going to be timely enough so that we can have an impact on the process?
Yeah, there are 4 final meetings left. We're skipping to my section after Reverend Parker's section. There are 4 meetings, 10. The goal is that we are going to have the map done before those 4 meetings so that we can present the map to the commission. And we also, the tie-breaking member, Philip Harchman, is the way we do our commission in New Jersey is it's half Democrats, half Republicans, and then a tie-breaking member. The tie-breaking member has been very amenable to speaking with us. And so we might even send him an advance copy to get his feedback. if that's-
Absolutely. This is about power. We
Yep.
go after him.
It's the goal. We got to persuade him though. He's the one who has the power here. We need to bring him
Oh,
on. But at the last meeting, that number 48% is something that that's been sort of our number that we've been really hammering on. And he brought it up last apportionment meeting. So that was very hopeful for us.
It seems to me that New Jersey has another problem to overcome because we are so segregated that there are concentrations of people of color. And then there are wide districts of whites who just live all by themselves. Obviously, the maps need to be contiguous in some way, shape, or form. I'm really curious about how these maps are going to be drawn.
As we said, you can draw the maps in 1,000 different ways, and we can definitely draw a racial electoral map. You're right. There's different concentrations of people, but it can be done. It can't be done always in every way we want to. We haven't yet been able to draw, for example, a majority Asian district in New Jersey, just due to the dispersal of the Asian population in the state. But in a lot of other ways, we think we're going to be able to get there. And I want to throw it over to Reverend Parker, who's going to talk about why this matters to.
And it's so important for us to participate in the map making session, in testimonies, oral or written testimony, because it impacts us directly. A lot of people don't really think about how redistricting impacts us, but what it does is, Ron, as you said, we are segregated. That's why our taxes are so high, actually, because we are so segregated. Each township, each city has their own municipalities and taxes and things that they have to pay. Whereas if we were a bigger community, then it wouldn't be as much. I'm sure there'd still be cost, of course, but it wouldn't be as much if we were a little bit more connected instead of so disconnected. It impacts our school systems, trash, water. I mean, literally anything you can think of, it impacts us for an entire decade. Like if I had a kid right now, 10 years from now, my kid would be 10 in elementary school, and they'd still be dealing with the same thing that we're dealing with before they were born. Let's see here. Estina, you have a question?
No, I'll wait until you're done. I don't have a question. I had a comment.
Yes, ma'am. So it's really important for us to really have that conversation, since we are faith leaders, a part of faith communities. Our community members, people that we talk to, inspire and help, they need our help in this particular area, because we don't know exactly what people are going through, what issues that they are facing. So it's really important for us to communicate how important redistricting is to our faith community, so that they can go and testify as well, whether, like I said, that be written or oral. There are a few different ways to testify. If you'll give me just a second, I'll share my screen. Matt said that there were a few more dates, and they are here on the screen. You all can see, correct? Okay, so here are the dates. We encourage you to participate, get your community, your congregation to participate by writing or testifying to the legislative body. Now, some of the things that you can write or say is, you really just have to think locally. Are we talking about our neighborhood? Yes. What is your neighborhood? What's in your neighborhood? What defines your neighborhood? What's your municipality? And what other counties or townships are in relationship with your township or county? Those are the things that we're looking for you to talk about. I know that in my community, I used to live in West Berlin, South Jersey. And one of the things that I spoke about in my testimony was there's a food desert there. There's one grocery store. The grocery store was trash, to say the least. They had old produce, things just weren't good. And, you know, right up the street in like Voorhees or Marlton, there was so much better resources for people. So, you know, those are the kind of things you want to talk about, like what's there, what's not there, what needs to be there for your community to thrive. You know, definitely give instructions. What criteria should be considered by the map makers? What is it that they need to consider? Is there something specific about the map lines, like was there a past problem, or why should a certain line be drawn a certain way? And make sure or ensure you reference specific landmarks. It's easier for them to visually think about what you're saying or writing if you have a visual in your argument or your paper. So those are some of the things that you can put into your testimony. I did write one. Let's see here. What I can do is when I send out the video to you all, I will also include a copy of my testimony just as an example. You definitely don't have to do it the way I did, but you know, just so you can see that it's easy to do. I highly encourage you to talk to your congregation. And once Matt finishes with the map making process, then we will talk about our call to action and what are some of the things that we can do to go ahead and get people to come out and testify. Matt, I will turn it back over to you. Oh, I'm sorry, Estina, you did have a question or comment.
Thank you. I don't want to belabor this. It's just that I think it's so important that we make sure that our communities of faith and just our communities that we purport to represent, that they understand that this is a process, that they understand that this starts with the census, that they understand that when we were pressing up on people to make sure that we got the census numbers right, that there's a reasoning and there's an evolution of what brings us to now, because it seems to me every decade or so, we're going through the same labyrinth. We're doing the same things. And thank you, Matt, for the work that you're doing so very, very much, and Reverend Parker. But the thing that is disturbing to me, we are constantly in this cycle. Atlantic City hasn't had a grocery store in more than 2 decades of us doing redistricting or so forth. So I think that in order to make it, all of us here, we are the choir. Reverend Parker and my brother Matt are preaching to us and we're happy. But the reality is we're not taking this word enough out to others so that they understand the mechanics of what we're talking about, because it sounds like mumbo jumbo when you are trying to even break it down and intellectualize, because quite frankly, locally, the assembly leader, he started making his moves on Black faith-based community last year, unbeknownst to them that he was only really trying to serve his own interests to expand his area. He wasn't really concerned about what you're bringing up tonight. They started making moves on us, and that was a year ago. So I guess I just come with a heart that's a little heavy, that we have to figure out another way to take this valuable information we have now, because we're still talking about the same problems. The story you just shared, I worked on an initiative with Michelle Obama when the Obamas were in office about food deserts, and Camden, Atlantic City. This is not the first go round that we've talked about these kinds of issues. That's all. I'm sorry. I don't want to take up You know, it's just that I think it's important that we talk about that because we're following the same pattern and we're talking about doing the same things. And I saw that, well, I knew that the public hearings are coming and it's almost moot. It's not quite because Matt and them are doing that map, but I'm saying we keep running down to this thing where we're really not making the impact that we should be, if that makes sense. And that's not a criticism. I'm not criticizing. I want us to think about, I guess for me, I've been doing this for a couple of decades. So I want to understand, why are we still find ourselves in the same position that we did 10 years ago, and then 20 years ago, and then 30 years ago? I'm trying to look for the evolution.
Estina, I think you make you're making some valuable comments here, and you're pointing out some real issues that we're facing as a community of color, as faith communities, and all kinds of communities. I think some of the things that I will say the Institute, I'll speak on behalf of the Institute for a half a second, and Salvation and Social Justice is we're willing to educate. I think one of the barriers is the education itself. What we're running into is people don't want to come and be educated. So we're looking to our faith leaders to give us a door in. So it's about who can we talk to so that we can get in the community and have that conversation and aspire to inspire. That's what we're trying to do. Hence, you know, these breakout sessions that we're having tonight, like, let's have that conversation so we're not having the same conversation 10 years from now. And I know that's easy to say and harder to do because life comes at us fast. The one thing that we are always going to do is educate and put I'm going to go ahead and say God's word. I know we're not all of the same faith, but first. And by doing that, in my faith, is by following the tenets of Jesus Christ, which is look out for your neighbors, watch those children. Let's not let Caesar do everything and just get away with murder, literally. So I'm going to write your name down, Estina, and I would love to talk with you offline if you're okay with that. And we can figure out how to get into Atlantic City and have those conversations with the people in power, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, definitely. You can get my contact information from Reverend Boyer. And I forgot to say, hey, Sister Reverend Robin, who I haven't seen in forever. But yeah, Reverend Boyer has all my stuff.
Appreciate it. Ron? Oh, Matt, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So I mean, I think Reverend Parker she's nailed it. The only things I want to say, I mean, also just like what you're saying is just correct too, by design, right? Like they don't want us to participate in this. That's just one. The reason that this is continually going over and over and over again is because the goal of this is to try to keep people out of it so that they can make those backroom deals. And that's always been the goal. The one thing I do want to say though is I do feel like this time, and I wasn't around last time, I will agree, but I have spent at least the time that I have. My job is to do this, right, on the Redistricting Council. And I do think from what I understand, this time is different, right? And we haven't won totally yet, but we are winning in a way that we have never won before. So last cycle, the Apportionment Commission had 0 meetings, 0 public meetings. Maybe they had 1, right? We got them to get 10 this time around. Last cycle, they did not talk about race in terms of something that they were going to advance. They did not talk about racial equity in terms of something that was a goal of their map, because I've read the filings for the litigation, right? This time, the tie-breaking vote has said explicitly he wants to make sure New Jersey's new maps reflect the fact that we are a, half people of color state. So like we're doing this because we are organizing, really. We're organizing as hard as we can. And as we'll get to next, we do have something really explicit and really intimate that we can ask people that doesn't get into the mumbo jumbo, that actually does change this process. And we really think we can use it to advance and build power. So we'll get to that next. So I feel you, but I think that we can do it this time. And the congressional map, if we can talk about that later, we didn't get everything we wanted out of the congressional map, but we just did an analysis. I just did an analysis a couple of days ago, and the last map, 6 out of New Jersey's 12 districts were, we'll say influence or majority districts with people of color. We drew a racial equity map, which boosted that number to 10 with 6 majority people of color districts. They didn't get to 6 majority people of color districts, but they did get from 6 to 10 new influence districts, right? So the new map that was drawn congressionally is going to be a way better map for racial equity than the one that has come before. And we really think that a lot of that was like the stuff we're doing here, turning out, getting people like you to turn out, getting your congregation to turn out. So I don't know if we'll be where we're going to be 10 years from now, but I think we have an opportunity right now to really shift it. And so I invite you to be part of that. And I hope you are. Anyway.
Ron?
Matt's whetting my appetite. Maybe he's going to be leading into the answer to the question that I haven't asked yet, which is specifically, are there either a specific map? I don't know, in the congressional one, there was a Republican map, there was a Democratic map, and then there was another map, and they chose a map. I don't know whether or not that's what's going to be happening this time around. If not, are there specific municipalities that are particularly egregious that we can focus on so that we can make sure that we make some progress?
That's an interesting question. We can talk a little bit about it later if you're interested. What I would say is the best you can do, at least in the short term, and if you want to move into the medium term and help me with some more strategy stuff, we can do that, is to talk about your municipality and your community, right? The area that you live in, and bringing that, and then we can incorporate it into our racial equity work, and we can sort of move it forward. And I can talk about how we're going to do that if we want to get into the mapping activity and next steps.
Absolutely.
I
Let's
didn't
go
ask
on.
that, Ron, but I'm going to try to in the next part, Ron, I promise.
Thanks, Matt. We're going to go on to the map making session. We'll do that for about 15 minutes and leave the last few minutes just to talk about our call to action and what we can do right now. Matt?
All right, hold on 2 seconds. Let's get this up. Okay, the big challenge here is we have a month. Right, the final map is due March 1st. We're expecting them to have it done by mid-February. We have a month to change what we could change here. And there is a way that we can shift the commission in a positive direction. So we've talked a bit about testifying. So testimony, and there's like, they did studies of the last redistricting cycle. It really does change the minds of commissioners, but it kind of has to be done in a specific way. So I think I heard from people who had testified in front of the Congressional Commission. There were a lot of people, for example, who testified from Congressional District 7 that they wanted it to be kept as competitive as it was and not add a bunch of more rural, whiter, more Republican towns, because they were often people organized by the Democratic Party and not taking an issue in that. But they were asking for sort of a district-wide change, and they did not see that, right? The change that they were the #1 people who turned out congressionally, and the commissioners did not really incorporate what they had asked for. And that's something that many people have seen, right? If you're asking for stuff at the district level at a really macro scale, the commission is less likely to pay attention to you. But if you were asking at the micro level, if you're talking about your community, they are very likely to listen to you. So for example, in the congressional map, Morristown and Dover were initially in 2 different districts, but we had people turn out and say, actually, there's a common community of people from different immigrant backgrounds who live in these spaces, and we would like to be kept together. And that's a small enough scale ask that they kept them together. We did the same thing for, I know Reverend Parker testified with a bunch of Rowan University students who said they wanted to be kept together with the suburban communities outside of Camden, and they were kept together with that. There were LGBTQ communities that were in Asbury Park and Neptune City that said, we are a common community and we'd like to be kept together. They were kept together. And the goal of what we're doing with this racial equity map is we're trying to take all of those communities, we're trying to use them to support the map that we're drawing. So we're going to draw a map that reflects where those communities are. And that's not only going to be an argument for our map, it's also going to be something that the commission will then hopefully take into account either piecemeal or altogether. right? The racial equity map isn't just a racial equity map, it's a community of interest map. It's a map that really reflects where people have said they live in New Jersey and the communities that they exist in. So what we would love to ask of you is to draw your own community of interest map. So that's what we're going to do here. And we're going to use something called Representable. Representable is not my favorite of these free mapping software sites, but Representable is a spinoff of the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. The Princeton Gerrymandering Project is working directly with the tie-breaking vote. Every map that gets put into Representable is going to be analyzed and looked at by the Legislative Apportionment Commission. So we are pushing people to this website because if we can get people to draw their communities in this site, and not a lot of community maps have been drawn, if we can get people to draw their community maps in this site, we can hopefully incorporate those into our map, use them as a reason we can argue for greater racial equity in their map. Let's show how it works. This is Representable. You go to representable.org, we'll send it to you. You hit Get Started. You click New Jersey. There's some explanation of what these things are. Click Next. And then who wants to be my volunteer? We're gonna draw a real map. We might not get all the way there, but I'd love to do a real map with someone. Reverend Parker, we can do you. Who wants to go?
Reverend Ed, are you available to help out? All right, you're on mute.
I'd be happy to participate and do the experiment. I'm a little overwhelmed right now, but I'll share what I can.
I promise. And this is to the point we were talking before about how redistricting is mumbo jumbo. This is not. This is just people talking about their communities, telling a story of where they live and what they do. So put your name in, Rev Ed Carl.
That's it. Yeah. It's 5 Inskeep Court. INS. INS. That's it. And it's Shamong. SHAMONG. Zip code is 08088.
What was that?
08088.
Great. Okay. So before we're going to draw this map, we're just going to talk about your community. So there's an example here. I would do this in a different order, and I will send you a worksheet afterwards that explains how to do this. So you can do it on your own, and you can also take what you do and turn that into testimony. So let's start with what they call cultural or historical interests, but what they really mean is describe your community. So the example they have is my community is the Latinx community of East Brooklyn. So tell me about your faith community. Tell me about your congregation.
Well, I'm retired, so I'm not connected to a faith community here. We travel to Camden County to go to worship, so I can't be helpful at all. The local United Methodist Church is a very small. Both local congregations are very small. One is in Tabernacle, and one is in Shamong or Indian Mills.
You can talk. So you can talk about either whatever community you feel comfortable with is a community you can talk about. They just want to know that these communities exist. So do you want to talk about the community you're aware of in Camden? Do you want to talk about the community, even if it's small, that you are a part of where you live? What would you like to talk about?
I think it's more, it would be a little more authentic to talk about where we live.
Great. So I am part of the Methodists.
Yes.
Congregation. What were those towns?
Hadn't, well, I can share of Tabernacle.
I'm the word speller, and I really apologize. Yes.
That's good. And Shamong, or they call it Indian Mills. And Shamong is SHAMONG.
Thank you.
It's a Lenny Lenape word, by the way. But that's beside the point.
Great. So tell me a little bit about the community. Just are you a urban commuter community? Are the members of people you? I know it can be very diverse. So just how would you describe the congregation?
So I think they're both very traditional, white, rural congregations. One of whom has an Anglo pastor and one has a Korean pastor.
Is there a sizable Korean community in your area?
No,
Tell me a little bit about so what church is this? What churches are we speaking of?
it is the Tabernacle United Methodist Church and the Indian Mills United Methodist Church.
So we're just going to list here in this top part, just like cultural institutions. So these are physical spaces that structure our lives, but are also, social places of congregation. So for example, where do people generally go to school? Or is it a place where people send their children to public school? Is there a common public school where a lot of people graduate from?
There's a common public school in Tabernacle.
Do you know what the name is?
I don't know the name of it.
No worries. What about healthcare institutions? Is there a hospital that people go to? Hospital or clinic?
The closest hospitals are in Voorhees or
Do you
Mount
think
Holly.
is that actually relatively far away?
It's anywhere between 12 and 15 miles away.
Okay. Would you consider it part of your community? Do you feel like you have to leave your community to go to a hospital?
We leave the community to go to a hospital.
That's something that I might put down in community needs and concerns, which are, we do not have a healthcare facility in our community. We travel 12-ish miles to go to that. We're going to speed this along. And then what do people do? So what is generally, I did a session with Wind of the Spirit earlier this morning, and they were like, a lot of our members work in the food service industry in Morristown. So is there a common economic scene?
I do
Working
not think
class
so.
Professional commuters.
There's a core of farming community. And there's some traditional farms that are rather large in the area. Many people work there. I couldn't give you the numbers, but
you don't need to. It's just telling the story.
Yeah. And I think a lot of other people work out of the area in the trades, in education, and in healthcare. At least that describes my neighborhood.
Wonderful. Okay, so you can go into much greater depth if you want to, and this is also what you would use to craft your story of your community when you present to the commission, if you would choose to. You can see when Reverend Parker sends her testimony, it was about these sort of things, these institutions and these places that structure our lives. So now, you do that. How would you? So let's do the Methodist community of Indian Mills and. They don't let you pick a lot of these topics, so generally I don't, just because I don't like limiting issues that face communities. Wait, what was that zip code? Let's see.
08088. So it's included with the Vincent Town zip code.
Yep, here we are. Tabernacle and Shimon Township. So where is your church located? What I would do generally on here, and I know we're low on time, is all the institutions that you had just talked about, as being part of your community, I would select them.
Okay.
And you can search for some of them. So let's see if we, Methodist Church of Tabernacle, and sometimes they come up and sometimes they don't. There's a Tabernacle High School.
So there are regional high schools, but there's a local school district for, I think, up to 6th grade or 8th grade.
Do you recognize, do you live in this area? Do you recognize any?
Yes,
So would you consider all of these chunks that I picked to be part of Tabernacle? I sort of just picked the center of the community.
yes, they are. Tabernacle and Indian Mills.
Indian
You
Mills,
see
yeah.
where you have Shamong Township and
I
Indian
do, I
Mills?
see it right there.
Yeah.
All right, so we already have a pretty sizable chunk. So you don't necessarily need to go any further than this if you're talking about a small community, right? What
Right,
I
okay.
because again, we're low on time, is you list those institutions, and they're going to have questions for you. It also have a worksheet that'll have questions. It talks about healthcare institutions. It talks about these different places that sort of structure our lives. You put them down just to know where they are. Then you find them on this map and select the blocks. These are census tracts. You select the blocks where they exist. If sometimes they're separated, so like I'll select this one, for example. They warn that you have to keep them together, and then just select the blocks that connect your community together. And this will give you what your community looks like. And that's it. That's all it is. You hit this save button. Gonna save your community. You can redo this if you want, but I'm gonna save this to the Institutes folder. We're gonna save it. And this is then going to become part of the analysis that they do as part of the final maps. And it's also going to become something that we're going to try to incorporate in our racial equity map when thinking about keeping communities together. So I would also then submit to an organization. You hit New Jersey Community of Interest, Fair District, New Jersey. Stop sharing. I know that was really fast. I normally do those sessions in like an hour to 90 minutes. If you would like to do a mapping session with me on your community, after this, Reverend Parker will also CC my colleague Aaron, who's helping to schedule those for us right now. Aaron is also the person who's in charge of Souls with the Polls, my colleague at the Institute. So he would be happy to set up a time for us to sit down with you and maybe a couple of members of your congregation. You don't need to make it too big, and we can map out what you think your community looks like. The one challenge again is we are trying to get all of those sort of done by the 26th so that we can incorporate them into the racial equity map. So if that is something you were interested in doing, it would be great. And then once you've done that, you have all the building blocks you need to go and give testimony to the Enforcement Commission. And we will give you the other things we'd love you to say, which are like the racial equity points, because there are clear values we also want you to lead with if you are part of this coalition. But give the racial equity points and then center it in just like your experience of your community. And that together is something that it seems micro, but so many of these little things together, we can really shift things, right? I used to have a colleague that says, we don't have a silver bullet, but we might have a silver buckshot. So that's what these feel small. These are just little tiny little things. But if we put them all together, we really think we can shift the whole system. That's the goal. That's our theory of change. I'm done talking. Sorry I talk so much.
Thank you so much, Matt. By a show of hands, how many of us feel the same way Reverend Ed does? We're all just feeling like our heads are spinning right now with all this information. The great thing about this is not the last conversation we have to have. Matt and the Institute have absolutely no problem with mapping. Salvation and social justice has absolutely no issue with having more meetings to have a conversation about that. As a matter of fact, here are some of the nonprofit organizations that are doing some of the work. We'll go ahead and send this out to you. And if you have more questions, you can email us at info@sandsj.org. We can get more information out to you. Here's our call to action. Let's go ahead and stay informed about what's going on. Follow us on social media. Donate, help us to continue our work. And you'll hear some more of these things in the next moment or so. We're about to get cut off. So I want to say thank you all so much for being a part of this. And I do look forward to sharing with you more. Y'all have a great rest of your
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for staying with us the entire time. I hope and pray that you enjoyed and you received the information in the rooms that you were given, and that you can take that information and use it and to activate the work that we're doing. Before we end completely, we just want to have a couple of last call to actions. If Simone, you can put that up on the screen. Thank you. So we ask that everyone please follow us on our social media so that you can stay informed about what's going on and about ongoing campaigns that we have. Also, you can subscribe to our email list on the Salvation and Social Justice website, and that is sandsj.org. That is the website. We ask that you spread the word about what we're doing, and that you ask people to join in the work, to volunteer, to join coalitions. If you need any additional information, you can send a request. I believe it's info@sandsj.org. That is our email. I believe it's info. Yes, it's info@sandsj.org. I will put that in the chat. And Rosalie, if you wanted to hop on just to talk about the donations.
Yes, sisters and brothers, we truly thank you for being with us tonight. I know most of you, if you were someone in the Black Health Equity Room, I know you didn't want to leave because we needed another hour to continue the conversation. We had such a robust conversation. It was great. But sisters and brothers, we know that you showed up tonight because you are committed to justice and you are committed to Black liberation. And just remember what Reverend Boyer said in his opening remarks. We can't dream our way to justice. It is time for us to act. We need you to become a financial supporter to reimagine a New Jersey that loves justice. Tonight, we ask you to become a partner by donating to Salvation and Social Justice. You can become a monthly partner by clicking, you can click here if you want to, or you can visit us on our website at sandsj.org. You know, we have, just from the conversations we had tonight, you know, we have a lot of work to do around criminal justice, Black health equity, education, and redistricting. And we can sit here all night and talk about the many, many other things that we can do. But Salvation and Social Justice is an organization that you know is here for the community. And we need you because we cannot do this work without your financial support. And one of the things that every one of us share on this line is a birthday. And I'll just lift up one thing that we can all do individually. On your birthday, if you are on any one of these social medias, you can actually do a birthday fundraiser for Salvation and Social Justice. I will encourage you to tell your friends, tell your family, tell your church members. We're all people of faith, and we know with God, all things are possible. Can you imagine how much we can do if we all stop dreaming our way to justice and actually act and become partners to Salvation and Social Justice? Again, thank you for the opportunity, and I am so happy to see you all. And I know I'm encouraged, and I trust God, and I believe that you will become a partner to Salvation and Social Justice. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you so much, Rosalie, for that. And again, thank you everyone for your participation and your attendance in today's strategy room. I really pray that, you know, the information that you got was relevant to what we are experiencing in this time. Simone is going to put a feedback link in the chat. You don't have to fill it out right now, but we do ask that you fill it out you know, relatively soon, so that we can, you know, just continue to improve, see what, you know, what you want to see next time, what topics that you want us have discussed next time. And at this time, or one more, please stay informed by subscribing to our email list. We send out emails. I try not to send them out too frequently because I don't want to bombard your email list. But it just stay informed, subscribe so that we can send you information about what we're doing. I'm creating a newsletter so that information isn't, sent out into multiple different emails, but it'll be in one central location. And then again, after we receive the videos from the Zoom, we will send those out as well. And then at this time, we ask that Reverend Eric Dobson have remarks and pray us out. It's still muted. It's not working. Okay, no problem. Then
There you
let's.
go. There you go.
Okay, gotcha.
So it wouldn't let me unmute, but thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for the work of Salvation of Social Justice and the work that the Black Multi-Faith Alliance, as Reverend Boyer stated, early on many years ago, him and I and Reverend Armstrong and Trenton and my Imam W. Dean Sharif got together, had a vision of creating this alliance. And I think it's important for us to understand the needs for faith leaders to come together around issues of social justice. So let me close out by saying this and keep it in the theme with Reverend Boyer. And this, as we start to celebrate Dr. King's birthday, I said this to Reverend Boyer and a few colleagues of mine that Dr. King's birthday was kidnapped. We have reduced ourselves to day of service on Dr. King's day, where I'm quite sure he would totally object to the things that are happening on his birthday, cleaning streets and wiping off graffiti and stuff like that. And one of the favorite sayings of mine and Dr. King is about power. And I think we minimize the fact how radical Dr. King was. And he was killed because he was radical. It wasn't that he was this soft-spoken person that he is morphed into today. But he says, power without love is reckless and abusive. And love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing demands of justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. So as we go through our day and remembering Dr. King on Monday, understand this, that he was just as much more radical than what we think of he is today and what the images of him is today, that he espoused upheaving this entire economic system in this country, turning it on its head and promising a guaranteed income for all citizens. So that's how radical he was. So just want to keep that in mind. And we all know that everybody who say they're for social justice, Dr. King said that I knew those folks who were with me because they were against something, not necessarily that they were really for genuine equality. So let us pray. Almighty Creator, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this gathering tonight. We thank you for these incredible individuals that you have empowered with the spirit of creativity, the spirit of faith, the spirit of commitment, the spirit of miracles, because you yourself has said that we are gods and we have created in the image of God, and therefore we have the same attributes of God. And I pray that we go in this spirit and this energy and the likeness of our ancestors who have endured so much and still proven that they are indeed created in the image of God. We ask this in all the blessed mighty name of all of those of our creators and our ancestors. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, everyone. Have a blessed night. Hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
I can just end it for everyone.
Thank you. I thought we wanted to debrief something, but that's okay, whatever.
We'll do that. We'll schedule a time for that.
Say that again?
We'll schedule a time for that. Everybody
Oh,
else
okay.
got off.
Okay.